In our studios in Cape Town, we are joined by the Provincial Secretary of Cosatu, Tony Ehrenreich. Good morning, Mr. Ehrenreich. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thank you.
It seems as if the lives of workers in the Doorns area has not really changed that much for the better since the protests last year. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Absolutely. I think the Doorns is the one area where the farmers have gone on a vicious campaign of taking revenge against workers, dismissing them, refusing to employ them for seasonal work, not paying them the full 105, or adding additional charges for things like water, electricity, and other services on the farm, which before was free. So the farmers clearly have been unhappy about the fact that workers said they can't live on 69 rand a day, and has now taken to victimizing them and dismissing them en masse.
What are the sort of salaries that we are looking at that these farm workers are earning right now in that sort of areas? And in current economic conditions, can people get by with that little money?
Well, 69 rand clearly is an unacceptably low wage, and the fact that workers went on strike is because they could not feed their families and could not sustain themselves. And there was no other way but to bring that to the attention of the country as a whole, that urgent action need to be taken. But what we've seen is that many of the farm workers have applied for exemptions to the 105 rand that the government then put in place. Those exemptions were considered by government, and government turned down the application for exemption in probably 80% of the applications because those farms were clearly profitable and could afford an increase in the minimum wage to 105 rand a day, which in itself is still a little work for little money for backbreaking work in the hard blazing sun all day. But all that we've seen is that farmers have really viciously lashed back at workers. All they're doing is they're intensifying the historical hostilities between farmers and farm workers. And if they continue in this way, there's no doubt that we're going to see an upsurge of protest and an upsurge of strike action to stop the kind of victimization that farmers are subjecting workers to. Because it's impossible for them to survive now that they've been put off of the farms. Farmers have bussed in other workers from elsewhere, brought in many foreign nationals, and are really bringing about a situation where they're trying to starve the historical communities who worked on those farms out of the areas.
So there's a real threat of not just only violence, but also xenophobic violence if there are workers that are coming from outside into these areas, you say?
Absolutely. The way that the farmers are conducting themselves, they're creating tension between different communities. And the communities were together when they objected to the 69 rand a day in areas like the Doorns and the rest of the Western Cape. Now the farmers are trying to divide them. The farmers, in fact, earlier this week had funded and promoted a march of farm workers who belong to their own Farm Workers Association against strike action and against demand for higher wages. And this had included many of the foreign nationals who lived on the farms who were forced to be part of these marches. This is clearly an attempt to drive division between different sectors of those communities and intensify the tension amongst workers who are starving and having difficult times, instead of ensuring that the tensions are not directed at the farmers, who in many instances are the ones who are causing these problems. I must say, though, that many of the farmers are cooperating. They're prepared to find a new deal, but there are those racist farmers who still cling to apartheid modes of operation, who are trying to take revenge on workers who dared to say that they were unhappy with 69 rand a day.
Mr. Ehrenreich, how is Cosatu supporting those workers that are being victimized? And what are your plans to get all the farmers on side with a minimum wage for all workers in the area?
Cosatu is supporting all workers as best as we can. We're working with the independent unions, with our unions in the industry, as well as with the Department of Labour and other agencies to make sure that we put a stop to this victimization. But in addition to that, what Cosatu has done is file a Section 77 notice at NEDLAC. And that notice, once the procedure has been followed, gives us the right to go on a legal protected strike, and this includes all farm workers across the country. So the demands that we put forward on behalf of farm workers across the country is an end to this kind of victimization, freedom of association so that workers can join unions without fear of dismissal, a decent wage of at least 150 rand a day, decent accommodation conditions and decent basic services on all of the farms where those exist. Then we want to see a real land reform project put in place that undoes the grand theft of the land of many communities in the sectors of apartheid. But we want to be positive also. We want government to support many of the farmers who work with us to ensure a more just farming environment. So we want to take forward the example that exists on Solms Farm in Franshoek, where workers and farmers have come together and in partnership they've been able to grow the farm, include workers as stakeholders and value holders, and that's the only way forward. And if the farmers do not come and agree to the conditions that we're pursuing in those negotiations, then early next year there'll be a total shutdown of the entire agricultural sector. But we won't allow farmers to continue their exploitative behavior as they have in the past. There's great examples of good farmers, and we want that to set the benchmark for South Africa. Those bad farmers clinging to apartheid, they have no place in agriculture. In fact, they have no place in this country, and governments should stop supporting those with billions of rands of taxpayers' money. We want a new deal, a fair deal, something that is in line with the value system and the laws of our country.
And the next few months will really be crucial in getting to that place. Is that accurate?
Well, the next few months is going to be crucial. We've started the negotiations with Agri-South Africa, with the retail sector, because it's not only on farms. We understand some of the problems that farmers have, that the retailers are squeezing them around prices because farmers are price takers, and the retailers are the ones really profiting out of agriculture. So we've included the retailers' organization at national level into the negotiations. We've also included the manufacturers. But we want to have a completely new agricultural sector that adds more value, that enhances the skills of workers and ensures a fairer and a better circumstance. That negotiation started on Tuesday of this week. If there's a breakdown in the negotiations, then we're going to see strike action. We remain hopeful that with government's help and the presidency, the deputy presidency is involved in these negotiations, that we can find solutions that ensures we build a viable, sustainable agricultural sector. If there's not, then we're going to see explosions of protest and strike action early in the new year, and that, I doubt, will not end before there's a real transformation, real partnership, real land reform, and proper wages for all farm workers, including opportunities for the children of farmers, farm workers to attend the schools of the children of farmers. How can the children of farm workers be second class to other kids in South Africa? That divides must stop in our country.
Mr. Ehrenreich, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for that contribution today. That is the Provincial Secretary of Cosatu in the Western Cape, Mr.